And we don't need to make it morbid, and we don't need to linger for long in death, because what my typical MO is, let's acknowledge it. Let's almost even like poke some fun at it. This bizarre human condition we are all facing together, poof, gone one day. But then use that again back as the motivator of like, okay, in light of that super crap reality, what do I want to do with this really interesting limited time?
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. Put your hand up if you hate Mondays. And if you do, I feel you. I have definitely been there. Even when I was working in some of the quote unquote coolest jobs in music and sports, there was many a Monday that I just wished away. But from where I sit now, if I'm lucky enough to live till I'm 83, I've worked out that I have 2,270 precious Mondays left. And yes, there is a way of working them out. We'll come on to that in the episode. And this is a number that's really got me thinking about how I can live all of them with as much intentionality and meaning. Because, as the title of my guest today's book says, you only die once. Jodi Wellman is the founder of 4,000 Mondays. She's a TEDx speaker, author, and assistant instructor in the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. Her book, You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets, is in equal measures hilarious, thought-provoking, and life-inspiring, walking you through prompts that will see you facing into your own mortality and seizing the life that you have now. So, Jodi, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Oh, I am downright giddy to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm I'm excited. The tagline of this podcast is having a dead conversation, and there is no one better to have a dead my husband, who's a lot funnier than me, actually wrote that line. Everyone laughs and goes, oh my God, that's killer. And I'm like, yeah, it wasn't me, but I'm so
Let's hope it does well for your ratings. Let's hope people actually tune in.
Exactly.
Hello to the four of you who are listening.
Who haven't been scared off by the fact that it's a dead conversation.
Well, I think they know better right by now with you, right?
So true. So let's talk about death. So I really want to root us into our conversation through a quote that's from your book, and it's that contemplating death is ultimately a life-affirming practice. It jolts us into fully participating in our lives with urgency, priority, and meaning. Oh. So let's talk about this, Jodi, from everything that you know, from all of your research and everything. Why is contemplating death such a life-affirming practice?
It's so ironic and weird, right? That I remember reading this in the research early days, and it's kind of what made me excited, is that it's true. I'm not the only one that feels like when thinking about death that it can be this counterintuitive boost to make a choice to live. But I remember reading it in various texts by various academics, this idea that inherently the contemplation of mortality is life-affirming because, we're not dead yet. Unless we're literally on our deathbeds, well, that's just a very different conversation of which, you'll have next week with somebody. But while we're lucky to have a heartbeat and we're lucky to be here, when we think about the fact that we're finite, inherently it ratchets up the sense, quite frankly, of urgency. And I want to be careful about that word because I think urgency is very close to like sheer and utter panic. And, neither one of us are here to be like, cracking whips, like we got to get on with it, life's too short, in that kind of tone. It's about this idea that, well, because it's a limited time only situation, and in psychology, we call it temporal scarcity, like when we recognize that something is limited, scarce, rare, it makes us value it more. It makes us see it as more precious. And so inherently, the lives we get to live right now, we'll take them for granted unless we stop and do the countdown. And that's the thing that makes us tend to take it more serious or less serious, depending, what you need in your life.
And that countdown. Let's talk about this countdown. Also, I love the fact that your book is called You Only Die Once, instead of, because I think YOLO is a great concept, but it's very expansive. We have no concept as you're going through life, like of how I remember my nan saying, "Oh, every year goes faster. I can't believe I'm at that point." She was in her 70s. And I was like, yeah, whatever, nan, like, come on. But I love that you only die once and having that countdown. So tell us a little bit about 4,000 Mondays.
Yes. Well, here I was making a change in my career, as many of us, either want to do or longing to do. But I was doing it for the second time, shifting from, at the time it was leadership development and coaching, into starting, what am I going to call this business? Then I talk all about how, wow, the fact that we're going to die can actually be a really animating feature for life. And I was trying to get clever, and I had all the sticky notes up, and I was like, wait a sec. I love the math of life, because I think it breaks it down to something that is so ridiculous that we can't avoid it. So when doing the math, it's roughly 4,000 weeks that we get to live. And Mondays are very visceral. Mondays evoke more feelings than any day of the week typically, right? It's like, do I want to wake up on a Monday and do this thing that I'm doing? Or am I dreading it? Or what's going on here? And so, yeah, the notion that roughly 4,000 Mondays is what we get. And so then do we want to evaluate it and see how's it going and maybe design it a little different, make some edits, make some tweaks, grand overhauls, whatever it is we need, again, to do this life justice.
I love that. And so I've got 2,270 Mondays left.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're still on the upward climb.
But I'm nearly at that halfway mark. So it really got me thinking, because actually, if anyone wants to do this, your website, you've got a calculator on there that you can do it. I was listening to your book, and then I was sort of doing the calculations, but I was like, actually, much easier doing it on the website. I think I got it wrong. I've got a thing with numbers where I was like, plug it in wrong into the calculator, but came out as 2,270, my own numbers. I maybe have got bias because I definitely had more when I did it on my own calculator. I was just to add a few extra in there.
Right. I hate to tell you, but it's not an exact science anyways. But anyways, the point is the point. So when you got to your number, you said 2,270?
Yeah.
How can I ask you how you felt and / feel about it?
Yeah. Do you know what? It was a moment where I went, oh, wow. Because it's nearly being at that halfway point, to your point around being on that climb, and you sort of think, okay. And it made me think, and then I thought, actually, to, I suppose, the point of the maths behind it, I was like, well, that's logical. I'm going to be 40 in a couple of years. So, and obviously I know, the average age, I think, is 81 for women.
Yeah, women would be 83. And I think
83.
in your lovely country, it might be a teeny bit higher just for fun for you. But yeah, you're...
Oh, so maybe my little bias I put on the one I did in my calculator.
Yeah, I do not have
more representative.
I should do the calculator by country. That would be like next level. I just don't know if I care enough yet. But anyway.
Yeah, no. But it definitely did get me thinking, oh my goodness. And it really actually connected me to that conversation I had with my nan, because I remember when she told me that, and I thought, oh, we're good. Come on, like, life doesn't go fast. I think I was about 15 at the time. So at that point, life definitely didn't go fast. But I suddenly thought, actually, I'm nearly at that halfway point in the Mondays that I have left if I live to that ripe old age. But actually, firstly, I don't know when I'm going to, exit this planet. And secondly, as well, every year does seem to go a lot faster. So it really did crystallize that perspective of, don't waste time. And actually, if I connect in, I love the construct of Mondays, because you're so right. If I think how many Mondays when I worked in corporate, even when I worked in some of the coolest jobs in the world, head of marketing for Formula One, looking after, amazing talent club, but it was out of alignment for me. It was someone else's dream, and it's an amazing dream, but it wasn't mine. And I think about how many of those Mondays I would be dragging myself into the office and wishing the week away. It's almost like you get to that hump day, you get to the Wednesday hump, and then you're downhill into the weekend, and then it starts again.
Well, thanks for illustrating that, because I'm working on a blog post right now about this idea of like, are you living for the weekend? And I think many of us live our lives in such a way, just sort of like a snapshot of not being happy in the week, for example, because of work, and saying, oh, but I'm going to come alive on the weekend, or my vacations are when the real me.
Yes.
That's the life I love to live. And like, let's be honest, like a vacation's always probably going to be a little bit better depending than, your slog job. But having that, like deciding that we're going to put life on hold. And I understand we make compromises and we have to have trade-offs, of course. But if you find ourselves just grin and bearing it and getting just to the weekend when I can live, or to the holiday, that might be a pretty interesting indication that maybe we need to summon up the courage to make a change. And again, the idea is that when we count the Mondays, for you, 2207, for me, 1809 this week, that's the thing that goes, wait a minute, it's just a perspective shift, right? Like, wait a minute, life is too short for me to be kind of settling or tolerating or playing it small, or if I'm afraid to move over to the new thing. Sometimes that math can be the thing that wakes us up and it reminds us that the time ain't getting any longer. It's just getting shorter. So maybe I should get on with it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And also what I connect into is it helps. Well, for me, it's helped me to realize, okay, and actually, even in my current, guys, I'm living my purpose, but it's made me think, okay, these are the projects like this podcast where I need to create the space to really lean into what is my truest purpose. But also, the amount of Mondays I have left, that feels quite abundant. So as well, I think the message that I've got, and I think that people can take, is that also shows you how many Mondays, how many weeks you've got to make these dreams into a reality, and I think the Mondays versus, like, say, years, years can feel 10 years, 20 years can feel quite, oh, I've only got 10 or 20, versus you've got these thousands, or, for some people, hundreds or whatever it is of Mondays left. What are you going to do with them?
That's such a cool perspective. Typically when I do a workshop, there's a big range depending if it's a company or an association, right? So it's like you've got people who are all the generations. And it's amazing because there is that cool perspective, like you said, of, wow, sometimes the when you're looking in the thousands, that does seem like, look at the potential and all the opportunity I have now in all these Mondays. And some people actually will still see that as that's not enough, just depending on, glass half full or whatnot. And then other people in the room will be like, I have 208 left, because they're maybe at a different level of maturity in life. And so, our perspective, of course, as we know, does change over our lives. But the lesson still remains. Is there something inside you that you've been wanting to do? Is there an experience? Are there experiences you've been longing to have? Are you looking for a little more vitality in your life? And if so, what are we waiting for? What are you waiting for? Don't wait. Don't wait for tomorrow.
I love that. Don't wait for tomorrow. We never know when we're gonna exit this planet. And with that in mind as well, I think death is something that we, for most people, you say you only die once. Oh, I don't want to talk about it. There's a brilliant quote in your book. It was by a Mexican poet, Octavio Paz. I was just scrolling through my notes. To the people of New York, Paris, or London, death is a word that is never pronounced because it burns the lips. The Mexican, however, frequents it, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. It's one of his favorite toys. And I just loved that, because actually it's about that sort of, you talk about it in your book, that confrontation of death. And it's not to say that it's going to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all, and I love it as well. I've heard you speak about this, where it's like, it's not about all, the kind of joy and just being like, I guess that toxic positive thing of let's just be really joyful about this all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually accepting that confronting our fear of death is uncomfortable, but the rewards are so powerful. So tell me a little bit more around, I suppose, this denial of death that you've seen through your work.
Yeah. We come by it so honestly. So I always like to normalize the dumb things we do, because we ain't alone. We all do tend to, not all of us, but Ernest Becker was actually an early leader in this field, and he wrote a book, The Denial of Death. And he actually won a Pulitzer Prize for it after the fact, after he died. Good for him. And it's just a crappy reality. Most of us have a desire to remain alive and to contribute enduring value, is kind of how it's often worded in the literature. And when we are so conscious, as humans, we're the only animals apparently with the marbles to know, like, we're not going to keep contributing enduring value for long. Like, I could end tonight. And that is supremely uncomfortable for most of us. And so, what we do, we find these little tricky bits in our brain and we avoid it. we just deny it. Or we're not consciously denying it, but what we're doing is we're skirting it. We are flipping the channel, or we are just trying. Now, actually, counterintuitively, we are intrigued by death because we will watch all the, I mean, I don't know about you, but I watch all the true crime murder shows. I can't get enough of them. Obviously, I'm a weirdo with death anyways, but we slow down at car accidents. We want to get a glimpse, like we're fat. It's like a morbid fascination by the very thing that we all know is coming. So that's an indication also that, we're willing to just kind of take a little peek under the body bag, but we don't want to think of us there. And the cost is great. So back to research, existential psychologists have been, beating the drum in their academic, journals for years at least, that it comes at a cost. If we don't think about it or talk about it, our anxiety about death, ironically, just kind of spikes. And so we think that by not going there, that I'll just get to bury it under the sand, but it's just going to ferment there, and not in a good kind of alcohol wine way, in a bit of a troubling way that can manifest as other kinds of anxieties that we don't even know. Sometimes our anxiety is actually rooted at this discomfort of being temporary. So denial, we come by it honestly. And my encouragement is just being willing to go there. And we don't need to make it morbid, and we don't need to linger for long in death, because what my typical MO is, let's acknowledge it. Let's almost even like poke some fun at it. This bizarre human condition we are all facing together, poof, gone one day. But then use that again back as the motivator of like, okay, in light of that super crap reality, what do I want to do with this really interesting limited time? So it's like we're shifting the energy pretty quickly from, that doesn't sound very exciting or interesting. But what is interesting is, what have I been putting off? What do I want to do before I die?
I think that's so profound, and that shift in the energy, because actually that's what happens when we go through. I've heard you speak about it. It's called the roar of awakening. That sort of realization, something big that happens. I'd love to hear you speaking about, but in that lightning bolt moment, there isn't it for me. When we lost our daughter, it was a big immediate shift in energy to be like, what is most important in this life? How can I integrate that understanding of my impermanence, that actually nature can sometimes not follow the natural order that we all assume. We're all just going to grow up and die in our old age. And it was really that was that lightning bolt. But I love that. And actually, you are hilarious. And just listening to your book always has been hysterics. Just the way that you talk about death, to be able to sort of like sit with the uncomfortable. And I think actually it's interesting because, when I was training to be a death doula, there was a lot of talk about the fact that actually for death doulas, there's this like real kind of that, a lot of people would be like, oh, that's really dark humor, but it's just funny. There's a lot of humor you can bring in to help people to take the little footstep into the conversation about death that you do. And I love that energy shift that you acknowledge, that actually, if I relate to, for example, for me, it took that grief and that sort of, oh my goodness, that really sort of shocked me into life. Tell me about the roar of awakening.
Oh yeah, I love all the things you're saying so much. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Yeah, roar of awakening. An existential psychologist said that, somewhere I read it, and it just grabbed me because of that phrase. And it's so funny that, again, as humans, that sometimes we need a roar to wake up. Sometimes we need a wake up call that, man, we would not have asked for, right? Like for you with a miscarriage, that changed the trajectory and course of your life in a way that, who knows now what, you might be happy to be on this path, but you did not ask for the roar. And yet we experience different versions. So the classic roar of awakening is through a brush with death or a near-death experience. Somebody has maybe an illness or a really close motorcycle accident, or almost falls off the roof and makes it, kind of thing. And they tend to emerge after, brushing their knees off with, whoa, like I almost lost this life that I've been taking for granted. And now I see through just almost like a new pair of glasses that the sanctity of life, like the potential, the clarity of my goals, what I prioritize now, and what I absolutely decide to throw in the trash bin because that stupid stuff I was worrying about just does not matter, because I almost died. And now I know that that's stupid and that this is important. And so I have a little bit of envy for people who have had that happen.
Mm.
The next best version, call that in an inappropriate way. It's not a good version, but many people experience in what psychology we refer to as boundary situations. So we might reach a very pivotal age, like a birthday with a 0 or a 5, or it could be a rite of passage in life, like it could be getting married or getting divorced, or it could be through a really sad thing like having a miscarriage or losing somebody you love, or retiring from a job and a career that you linked your identity to quite tightly. All these moments in life that kind of thrust us into new uncharted territory, they often rankle and do things with us existentially, where it's like, what am I doing? Am I making the most of my time? What is my life for? Should I be doing, like, we reckon with some pretty important questions during those transition times, those boundaries, and they're valuable. So sometimes what I try to do in my work in a non-violent way is to create like the equivalent emotionally of a near-death experience without any death, or no jumper cables required. But this idea of imagining that you'd almost died, or imagining and doing the math and calculating that time's temporary in order to do that thing that we unfortunately need from a motivational point of view, which is we need the spark plugs in order to actually take our lives, to stop taking them for granted, really.
I love that. I think it's so powerful. It's so needed. And actually the amount of people where I've held space for them in loss and then coached them on the forwards path beyond. And it is really interesting where actually, I wonder, without the support and having someone to almost remind of at that boundary point, at that moment of transition, of that lightning bolt of clarity that comes through. How many people I've spoken to where there's that real wavering, business as usual kind of kicks in, and you sort of go back in. And I think not helped by the fact that obviously, sort of bereavement leave is, I know in the US is pretty much not there oftentimes. In the UK, it's very, very small. And so there's no time to really process. So you get back into the business as usual. But actually that invitation to be able to say, all right, let's really, really have a look. And to that point of the roar of awakening, taking those lessons from people who've been through that roar of awakening. We'd never wish a near-death experience on anyone. However, that I love that you're taking forwards those lessons of actually how can we put that spark in the ignition of that life path for you? Because actually, I was reading the comments under your TEDx talk, and they were so wonderful. That one of the comments at the top that I saw was someone who said, I had a horrendous crash and this is my experience. And it really, really touched me just reading her words. And she was thanking you for sort of voicing, I think, everything that she'd felt. I could imagine if you've been through that experience, it can be really hard in this world where we are so disconnected from this topic to really sort of have that understanding. And then obviously for that to be spread to all of us.
Well, I'm going to go back and read that comment and comment back to that dear woman. And the idea, you're reminding me of a friend of mine in town where I live here in California, who started a nonprofit for survivors of breast cancer. And she worded it so well. She said, and it just sounds so simple, but she's like, I've been given a second chance at life. And wow, isn't it crazy that many of us need that? We need the opportunity to say, what do I want to do different now? What do I want to do better? What version of myself do I want to be? And that second chance, it's not just a privilege for people who have almost died. I think any one of us starting now can use this as an opportunity to say, oh, I'm gonna do it for real now.
Yes, I love that. And you've really got me thinking. In my episode with Dan Ariely, he talked about how we should all have multiple, I think he was talking about every decade we should be having a midlife crisis, but that it's a good time to really reflect and say, what isn't working for me? Let's make this work instead of continuing as is. And you've really got me thinking about that opportunity where we can really seize it and go, okay, what do we need to let go?
This is a perfect example. So Shay is the woman I just spoke about who started the nonprofit Shay's Warriors. And she said I think she was in chemotherapy for 24 weeks. And she brought a new, fresh journal with her in. And as she was getting her treatment, she'd crack open the page of the journal and she said, my first instinct was to draw a circle. And I wrote inside the circle, when I get through treatment and I'm in remission, this is all the stuff I want in my life. These are the people I want. These are the mindsets. These are the activities. And what was maybe even more instructive was, here's what I don't want inside the circle. And so she wrote some names of people that just no longer serving her, some mindsets. Like for her, I'll remember she said, I'm no longer going to be a pleaser for other people's needs. I'm going to consider my own too. And just, things that was just like we could all do that circle today and we don't need to be in chemo.
Oh, I love that. Was it Shay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you for that. That's so brilliant. We could all do that. And also I think what I connected into as well is, in those challenging times as well, I think that can really show who is in our corner, who isn't, where is that reciprocity in our life? Where are there areas where they're not in alignment? So as well, you've really got me thinking about this as a practice. And yeah, as I've been navigating sort of my grief journeys and stuff, to have been able to just have my journal out and go, right, what is and isn't good for me? What can I see right now? I think that's such a powerful practice.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Shay, for that one. And I suppose as well, because what's coming through for me as well is that reconnection to death. And one thing that really got me chuckling was around you talking about obituaries and who died that year with your dad, and that sort of ritual that you have. So I'd love to just hear any of these, it's funny saying fun ideas, but any of these ideas of how we could just reconnect to death as a part of life, and also use that then as that kind of trigger of, okay, let's make this life work.
Yeah, you're so right about needing a trigger, because even though we could talk about this right now, like we know that we're not just going to now permanently go forward and never take life for granted again. Like I do this for a living and I need to be reminded daily about how to not take my time for granted. So I find that there are a bunch of little ways we can just keep it kind of top of mind. And again, not too obsessed, but just to go, oh, right, remember, I'm going to die at some point. I am a fan of not only counting your Mondays, that's one, having little reminders around you, little tiny, you can get cool skull art or jewelry or something that just kind of reminds you. Of course, I'm wearing my sugar skull earrings today. I'm never not wearing something, I don't think, with a skull, but something that you might stumble across in your home. Don't not walk through the cemetery. Take a little meander and be like, I wonder how this person's life was. And it doesn't mean that you need to stop and contemplate the gory details of your potential death. No, it's just bringing it into the life you live. You mentioned obituaries. Out of curiosity, some days, just go there online. Look at the names and the pictures and the lives, and inevitably it will make you, because we're all inherently, I think every 17 seconds we stop and think, how does this apply to me? So you're gonna end up, when reading Yolanda's obituary from Essex, you're gonna end up like how I used a London reference there.
Love that.
You will end up thinking, like what would be on my obituary? What would that say? And that's just the whole point, is just allowing it to seep into this little denial, skull of ours. Same thing, have conversations with friends, at your next dinner, get people thinking about how many Mondays they have left. What do they think about it? What's on their bucket list? When do they want to do the next thing? Because again, the energy is more around the living than the dying. And going to death cafes, if that's interesting to you, just in indulging in the conversation more and trusting that you're going to be able to handle it. And in fact, the more willing you are to be able to dabble in death, the topic, then the more it will ameliorate, like I said earlier, any of that scariness or tension that you hold about it. Because that what you discuss and open up, now it just becomes like, oh, that wasn't so bad, versus keeping it contained in its own little tiny, tightly sealed coffin.
Yes, we need more skulls, more obituaries, more. More death.
Rock
More death
on as I.
in our,
There you go.
in our life. Do you know what I'm thinking? I'm like, where can I put skulls around my? Maybe I need to have one right here. I need to get a
I'll
little
send
thing.
you one. That's what I'll do.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Jodi. And you really got me thinking as well, because it did make me smile when you were talking in your book as well around visiting a graveyard. And you just mentioned that as well, of just pop in and see, because I was in Berlin recently with a friend, dear friend, actually. It's her music that's the theme music for this podcast, Katie Gray. Shout out, Katie. And she and I it was the first time we'd actually met in person. And I was like, do you fancy going to see a graveyard? And she's like, oh my God, I love going to see graveyards. And we sort of kindred spirits. We were sort of like running off to go and visit the graveyard that's right next to the Berlin Wall, and kind of doing the more traditional history bit, and then the graveyard. And it was really interesting as well, because what she connected into there that really sat with me was she noticed there was these amazing tombs. It was sort of central Berlin, so I think there were some quite rich and quite famous people who were buried there and their families. But she noticed that even the ones that were so kind of beautiful and ornate, that clearly there was, or maybe there was no family now to continue to honor them, because this was sort of like whatever it would be, like one, maybe more centuries ago. And actually that it had sort of all started to just degrade, and you couldn't make out who it was, no names or anything. And she said that really made her think about, for her, obviously, in her impact and everything, that everything is impermanent, including her music, including everything. I just thought it was such a powerful lesson for us all of our impermanence. So I would definitely say at these graveyards, there's a lot of life lessons that we can take.
You'll take your thoughts to really interesting places indeed. Yeah. Yeah, I love that, because you're hitting on legacy, this idea. It's really important that some people, and I love how we're all different, right? So someone might go and think, wow, yeah. And like annihilation in a way, or obliteration. Like once we're gone after a period of time, we won't be remembered. And I hope that things like music and art will endure for longer, but maybe who knows how the world will work. Maybe then that's it. And sometimes for some of us, that sense of the finality and the acceptance of, the end will give us a perspective on our lives today to either go balls to the wall and create just because, or it'll let us settle down in the same way that, when you're filled with awe and wonder, when you look up at the stars or out at the ocean or out in the mountains, and you just think, oh man, I am but one tiny microscopic piece of this beautiful universe and existence. And it helps size us appropriately tinily. And that does not sound like the grandiosity that's like, go live your life, YOLO. That's actually kind of the opposite, but that can be really precious for us, is to be like, wow, I'm part of something way bigger. My silly little trivial little problems really don't matter in the grand scheme of the universe. Now pause, contemplate what would make me feel alive, to do for the rest of this week. So subtle little things.
Oh, I think I'm just thinking about those times in life where you feel like you are at the center of the universe and what's happening is literally the whole world crashing around you, when actually, in the grand scheme of things, it's all okay. It's all going to be okay. And actually, yeah.
Right. And in my very irreverent, sometimes inappropriate ways, sometimes I'll just be like, I'm dying. This doesn't matter. Like I'm dying very slowly, I hope. But this stupid thing about how I made that dumb mistake in the email, who the F cares, really? Like, we're all just going to die. So I think that sometimes that perspective can be helpful.
Jodi, I am taking that. I'm going to have that written next to my laptop when I'm working and stressing out about something. Just be like, just remember you're dying.
Yeah.
It's all okay.
Yeah. You're a ticking time bomb. This stupid thing doesn't matter.
I am definitely I have a feeling I've got a lot of coaching clients who I'm going to mention this to. I'll credit you. And they're going to be like, I'm taking that. Don't forget, we're all going to die. People will probably say, I work with a lot of people in corporates. And what's the phrase? It was from my former boss in Formula One, always just say it's PR, not ER. And so I have a feeling the new phrase. And so that's now loads of my clients are saying, oh, I use that all the time when sort of we're stressing about the shoot or something. It just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of life. But the new phrase is going to be like, don't forget, we're all just dying.
And then you need to follow it up with something that shows that you really aren't either a serial killer or just deeply troubled. Because then you have to be like, then you can bring in some sunshine. Yeah. But it's like, yeah. I love it. We're on to something.
We're on something here. I can see it, like t-shirts,
Yeah. It's like, just doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Dead.
We're all going to die in the end. So, in speaking of sunshine, I want to talk to you because obviously, in all of your positive psychology work, and I know within positive psychology as well, gratitude is a real anchor within that. And you wrote in your book that thinking about death is like a natural gratitude booster. And I want to really root into that because I found this bit really, really sat with me. So could you just explain, what is the role of gratitude in really living this life well?
Oh gosh, you hit the nail on the head, because in the world of positive psychology, which, scientific study of well-being, what makes life worth living, gratitude is one of the constructs that is the most empirically studied, that and optimism. And gratitude is, it oozes to me in my mind visually. I tend to be visual. It's like, the Grim Reaper for me is this like unexpected, uncanny like delivery mechanism for gratitude. So back to what we were discussing earlier about how thinking of death is just like life affirming in nature. When we recognize that we get to still be alive, okay, which is very different from just the go through the motions day by day, taking our lives for granted, our autopilot, just the way we normally live, me too. But when we stop and go, oh, wow, like, and it could be because a friend died and you realize, oh, like, I'm still here. It could be because of one of those boundary situations that happens to us, good, bad, or otherwise. It could be because we almost died, or it could be because you're listening to this incredible podcast and you're reminded of the fact that, right, only have so many Mondays left. When we do that, it tends to make us appreciate the very fact that, again, we do get to be here. So there's a concept, post-traumatic growth. Whenever we go through any kind of traumatic event, research is clear that like 30 to 50% of people, that's a big chunk, will actually emerge at a higher level of psychological functioning than had they not had the traumatic event. And one of the 4 components of post-traumatic growth is a deepened appreciation for life, that gratitude. So I'm not suggesting we have to go through trauma. I mean, trauma is going to find us. So let's just like wait 15 minutes or something. But when we will stop and appreciate, I have been resilient through this crappy time, or I am finite and I've done the math, and it allows us to appreciate, it allows us to see that life is something that is precious. And the research studies, I think, are super cool. There are some studies where they'll prime somebody to read an article about bananas or something, and then they'll prime somebody to read an article about death, and then they'll get you thinking. Then in a separate part of the study, really explicitly thinking about your death. And when you come out of that study, I'm botching it, but good thing I didn't do the study. The point is, if you are deliberately grateful after being exposed to any kind of death, it's called mortality salience. It's, when we're exposed to the idea of mortality, people will remain grateful for an elongated period past the study. If there's a deliberate stopping and pausing and saying, wow, I'm grateful I get to be here. And being exposed to death actually inherently does just make us more grateful. We're not even doing the mechanics in our heads. We're not doing gymnastics to stop and make that happen. But when you think about death, for most healthy humans, it does make us do that appreciation inherent and just naturally. So again, another benefit of bringing the Grim Reaper with you to lunch today, like at a distance, but with you.
over here at arm's length, but within eyesight. And I think the Grim Reaper in your book always did bring a smile to my face, because it's such a visceral oh my goodness. But I think there's something really powerful there. What I took away as a morning mantra of, I get to be here today. I get to walk another day on this planet. And then the acknowledgement, because one day I will not be here. That understanding, that appreciation really got me thinking. My takeaway from this is a new morning practice that I'm going to add into after my journaling and everything. We take the dogs out for the walk, to just stand there, feel the ground under my feet, and realize that which I'm feeling, in good and bad, someday I will not.
Right. Like, oh, thank you. I got to wake up today.
Mm.
Just the So being alive and there's another one, I love all the prison movies too and shows. And, you think about when you take for granted, say, for example, your freedom, and let's say you were um, incarcerated. This example is quite sketchy, but you, you'd look out your window if you even get a window in your cell. I don't even think a lot of cells get windows.
Mm.
Or you get your 1 hour of yard time or something, and like how much you would savor that and how much you would be longing to think about, man, what I would do if I was out on the outside. Or if I think a lot about, unfortunately, being in a car accident, I should knock on wood, and that what I would think of if I was in a wheelchair, I think, oh man, all those days I languished on the couch when I could have been out climbing and hiking and doing things with my body that I now. So any opportunity we have to stop and think about the ways in which we take life for granted, doing those mental exercises can just be valuable to say, wow, I'm not luckily incarcerated right now. I can get out and I could go to that restaurant I've been delaying going to with that friend of mine. I can go and I could get on the bike and bike around the block because I have my legs. I could dream and I could start this business, or I could have fun tonight, or I could do something and volunteer because I am not dead yet.
Yes, I am not dead yet. So there is no time like now to start. That is so profound. And with that in mind, if you were to suggest to anyone who's listening or watching what your sort of one ride or die practice would be to help people to live life well, what would it be? What could that first step be to really
Oh,
help people integrate this?
I love this question because I think what it leads us to is where I at least come to sometimes, which is this all or nothing thinking. Like, okay, I'm going to die. Yeah, no pressure. Okay, now I have to live. And it can create a little bit of this magnanimous feeling of like, I have to live large or it won't count. And I would love to just maybe recalibrate that and say that for most of us humans, um, living a life worth living, or living what I call astonishingly alive, is so beautifully relative to what lights you up. And so I think sometimes the first step is just write out a list. Type it out or write it out in your journal or on the back of your pizza box or however you want to record it. But like what are the things that bring you even just the smallest bits of joy? What makes you feel alive? And there are some exercises I go through in the book like this, but tuning in first to your, like, quite frankly, like your cheat sheet can be the thing where you look at it and you go, wow, for me, it is going for that bike ride. It's undeniable. I love it. I feel activity, like I've huffed and puffed a little bit, or I saw some birds, or it was social, or whatever it is for you. It doesn't matter. For you, it could be cozying up and reading a great chapter, which is also my answer. Or it could be planning an amazing epic getaway and planning the restaurants and planning the tours, or it could be, there's no shortage. But identify what is the thing that makes you feel alive, that gives you even just the smallest little bit of joy, and then make an effort to do one of those things. Again, as small as it could be, having your coffee outside instead of just going through the motions inside. Or it could be novelty is crucial. So I'm going to sneak another answer in here. So in addition to identifying what you like to do that makes you feel good and alive, shaking it up a little bit is just sort of like it's a little extra trick to exposing yourself to more life. And you were referring earlier, talking to your Nan, about how life speeds up as we age. And a lot of research shows that our perception of time goes faster and faster because we're kind of doing the same thing every day. And that indiscernible routine we have is what makes time feel like it is just a blur. Whereas we can throw a wrench in it if you change your routine a little bit. So if you're normally doing the same thing, it's like, well, what if you did you order in every Friday. Well, okay, first of all, you could order a different kind of food you've never tried before just to shake it up. But you could also say, what if we did that on Monday? Or so new foods, different date night, go for, an outdoor walk, with a thermos full of wink, wink, whatever you want. And, go down drive to a different neighborhood, take the long route home. If you're driving and you've always been curious about what's in that weird antique store, pull over. It's never too late to pull the car over. Go in, check it out, laugh, even if it's just the most ridiculous store, which is actually more fun when something's ridiculous. Trying different things, different breakfast. You have a usual Saturday routine? Yeah, not this Saturday. Just shake it up a little bit. You can do the laundry on Sunday,
Oh, I love that. And what I can really feel is, it's sort of bringing in that flow state and shaking
Hmm.
things up, and I think it's so important. But even now, you got me thinking about the fact that I love my life. I've curated it, but there's a lot of drum beats that happen all the time. And actually,
Truly.
in your book, it's made me think I need to dive into the PDF, because you've got, is it the autopilot assessment?
Yes.
I'm like, that's going to be me tonight. I'm going to be doing my autopilot assessment and just
Yep.
checking off, see where I'm at.
And hey, like I rag on habits and routines because I do think that they're the things that like glaze our eyes over and we become these highly functioning zombies. Yeah, for sure. And I also recognize that some of us like structure and routine. So I'm not here to ruin your life by saying it needs to like blow it all up. And you're like, but I really like my waffles. Oh, no, you can order an omelet once and go back to your waffles. Or like, this is just like, sometimes it's just like testing the limits of doing something a little bit different. And for those of us who are already what we're called neophiles, like the need for newness, you're probably already saying, I would never do the same thing twice. Cool. You might just need to up the ante a little bit more with your newness factor of life with variety.
Oof, I love that. And I've got one final question for you. And I ask this of every single guest. I also ask this of myself when I do the solo episode. So from where you're sitting right now, if you could write a note to yourself, and it might be at that point when you're working in corporate and it was just completely out of alignment, it could be at any other of those life's transitional moments.
Yeah.
What would you say from where you're sitting now to that version of yourself in the past?
Oh, yeah. Go boldly. There's an old expression about do not go gently into that night, like as in like rally against death, which I'm always curious if like death doulas are like, just let death come for God's sakes. Don't rally. But I feel like in my days, I want to go boldly into my days because that would be a potential regret I would have, which is conscious and important to notice so that I could course correct it. But live it, go. Don't let life be unlived. Don't be too, I mean, I'm a homebody and I just love like comfort and I like get out there, try it, do it. Who cares? You're not going to like, don't worry about bothering somebody. I'm always too scared to ask for help or not ask. Just go for it. Because again, life's short. You could die tonight.
Oh, I love that. Just go for it. That's spoken to me. I'm that person who's like, I won't say this, or I can't introduce myself to that person. So I'm going to be going boldly into these.
Yes.
You have inspired me, Jodi. Thank you so much. And finally, tell us, if someone wants more of you in their world, how can they connect with you? How can they find out more? How can they read your book, etc.?
Oh, I love you for asking. Thank you. Pretty much everything is on my website, which is 4000mondays.com. So, yep, there's a link to the book, which is audio or like an actual book. I do a Monday blog post every Monday, of course, because 4000 Mondays. And I have so much fun with that. And that, anybody can reach out just to say, hey, I love interacting with humans and cats. So all of the, 4000mondays.com.
Oh, Jodi, thank you so, so much. I mean, most people in this world, I think, hate Mondays. You have made a career out of us seizing the life out of them. And you're inspiring me as well to move into my Mondays with more intentionality. So I'm so, so grateful to you for our conversation today.
Oh, right back at you. Thank you.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. And we'll never make it, and we'll